And I put this map out because this is kind of a precursor to what we're working on with this project.
Oh.
And we're going to make a digital version as well
Mm-hmm.
with old photos for people to be able to see what it used to look like back in older days. Actually, we've got a lot of photos
Back
from
in
1800s.
my days.
Well, probably before
I was
you.
born here
Were you?
91 years ago.
91? Holy smokes! That's a impressive run.
To still feel good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know where the meat house is?
Yep. The Rokies?
I was born at that location.
Get the rest of that later.
Yeah.
You were?
Yeah.
Was there a hospital there?
No.
No.
No, we weren't born in hospitals. We had a local doctor brought me in
That's amazing.
at home. 110 East Adams.
110 East Adams. There we
Yep.
go.
Gosh.
We were just out at Zobrist Construction. Is that
Oh,
relation to you?
Well, yeah.
I figured. They have some nice history photos there too.
Oh, do they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they would have. Mine now
Yeah.
is 43 Prairie Village.
Oh, okay. You're out there. And as I remember, your family had a hand in building that.
Yeah,
that
we
was
bought
Zobrist
the
too.
land.
Yeah. Yeah.
The village board run us out of town, so we went out there. We started expanding. They wouldn't let us, we couldn't build what we wanted to build within the limits of the village at that time. So we expanded the village.
You did expand the village, and you made a very nice place. It's been popular ever since.
Yeah.
I owned a place out there when I lived in the UK. I kept a condo
Is
there.
that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there you have
Yeah.
it.
My daughter lived there.
Yeah.
How many generations of your family lived in Morton?
Well, my grandfather Zobrist came over from Switzerland,
Yes.
and he lived on North Main Street. He built a house there on North Main. Well, Morton first was located at my sister's house on the farm, where the railroad went north to Chicago
Yep.
from Pekin. What was that? That was a Santa Fe
Yep.
owned railroad at that time. We had railroads, Santa Fe, the Pennsylvania, Illinois Transit System,
Okay.
the ITS rail from Peoria to,
The interurban?
yeah,
Yeah.
the interurban. And that brought a lot of people in from Mackinac, all these little towns around, for where? The pottery, both potteries. That's where us kids learned to play
Yeah.
with clay.
Yes. And as I remember, you had a fair few stories about that at the
Oh, my.
coffee shop.
Yeah. Well, we, all through high school, all the guys worked there. We'd go in after a ball game and punch in. Almost all of us were making at the pottery across the road here, the Morton Pottery. We were making Anheuser-Busch cigarette ashtrays and all kinds of stuff. So we got a good learning. I helped build the last before the other pottery burned down. I was still in high school tending the bricklayers and different guys. And the one guy I tended was the guy that started the bomb construction. Their dad, Otto Baum.
Ah.
He'd just keep hollering mud, mud, bud. That's all I heard for Christmas vacation. We were burning, making those things. My dad had a contract for the Padres really did well in the 30s.
It was very successful, yes.
Yeah,
Was your family already in the construction business at that time?
my dad was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a carpenter growing up. He farmed south of Deer Creek, and he sold the farm. His brother-in-law was here working with Mathis Lumberyard. He was the Smith boys really trained my dad. They built all over this area, and they were my dad's brother-in-laws. So that's what was going on. A lot of corn cribs being built and barns. That's all I did growing up. Tend the men that they used our muscle, and that's the way it went.
Before we get too far from your family history, your story, you talked about coming from Switzerland. You told me once the town, I think. Do you remember the town that they came from?
Yeah, I went there and stayed with their cousins when we toured there.
What
My
town?
wife and I.
What town was that?
Oh, just straight north of
Bern?
where we fly in. What was that major airport over there?
Zurich?
Zurich. They were in a little town north of Zurich.
Okay. And why do you think they left Switzerland and came here?
Well, it was religion.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
They were part of that group that was were they apostolic or Mennonite?
Apostolic.
Apostolic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they among those who left, many went to Alsace-Lorraine. A few went into Germany and Austria, but mostly they came here.
Most of them were, if they could get here, they were coming.
Yeah.
Because my great grandpa, lived on North Main. But I got to tell you this: Morton wasn't here. The village that was laid out was out on my brother-in-law's farm, where the trains came through. One was from Indiana, a train that came there to get to Peoria, and the other one was I took one of my uncles had a layout of Tazewell County, and Morton was started out there, where the trains crossed. Natural, just natural, and my brother-in-law always kept those layouts of the lots and everything. Now, last Friday, we moved my sister off of the farm to Restmore.
Oh,
She was 95 this year.
wow. Now, so this would be just a little northeast of where Morton is.
Yeah, that's where the major traffic was. And I remember when 150 was laid through from Goodfield on in, from Bloomington, because all my uncles farmed out there, and they all had horses, and we didn't have cat. They built that highway all the way with horses and scrapers.
Yeah.
Oh, Tennessee.
Tennessee
Goes right past there, and the other one's Lakeland.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
What do you suppose, Bud, caused the shift back to where Morton developed later on, the 20s and 30s?
A different family
Ah,
came in, bought the land. It could have been the Rapps
okay.
when they came, because they were looking for clay.
Ah,
They were potters over there. And
when you say over there, you mean in Switzerland? In the old country?
in Germany,
Germany,
and Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, the Witzik family and those came from right on the border of Germany
Yeah.
and
Switzerland?
yeah, yeah. And they all, in those areas, they were all spoke German.
Yes.
That's all I heard growing up was German in the church. German Bibles. We had everything came over here. And I went to some of the Grandpa Rapp's funerals.
Oh.
They were pretty old when they came over. And of course, we lived next door to the Rapp family. Growing up, I was raised with all the Rapp boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back a ways, but were you here in '76?
77 when I came.
You came the next year because we had the big 200-year celebration out where I live now. They pulled a hayrack in there. We had our band on there. Well, I was on the board at that time,
Yes.
and Gene Mathis was mayor. Yeah, goes back a ways.
What do you think accounts for the attractiveness of the Morton area for all of them? It's a very homogeneous group of people. Most of them
The
came
people.
From, do you think it was the people?
Attracted other people. We had good churches, any kind you want. We still have, and that draws good people. You can tell it every time. They're all you have to do is go around and meet some of the people, and I bet even all the late newcomers were attracted through people that live here.
Well, I think that's
Yeah.
true.
Oh yeah,
We've talked about that in almost every interview. There is a kind of a Morton value
Yes, sir.
system that people, even if they aren't part of the older families, the people more
Right.
recent, that they're attracted to this
well,
notion
and
of
they're made. The people welcome them. They can feel it. You know, you can feel it if you're
yes,
liked or not.
yes,
And with good schools, number one, good area around us, it just makes a big difference. And I know the way I was raised, I would never leave Morton. I knew it. I could feel you were loved everywhere you went. We'd shop, well, we were only a block away from Main Street, and us kids would go down there, little kids, and they'd call the order in. Oh, yep, there they come. Us kids would carry the groceries home from Mom. We didn't have cars. My dad did, but none of us. Bicycled, and that was it. But you see, even at that time, though, we were like family with all the people
Yes.
living here.
yes.
They knew us. I don't care where I went as a little kid. Everybody knew me. It was just that way, and they'd boss us too. Stay away from there. But you know, the teachers we all knew like our mother. They were that way. I knew every teacher I ever had, personal. And I think that really made a difference.
You had two brothers and a sister. I've kind of forgotten.
I had 5 brothers and 4 sisters.
Oh gosh, I didn't realize your family was that big.
10. And most of them were born here. The older ones are gone. But my sister that we moved out here, she just turned 95. And, well, she run Restmore for 40-some years herself.
Huh.
We built it in 62, I think, the first building.
Yes.
And that building's like a brick, boy.
Yeah.
It's solid. And I think they got it about full.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. Yeah, we worked pretty hard on that when I was in office, trying to get that occupied.
Did you? Did you know the man that designed it? He worked at CAT.
Designed the building?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
It was the first. We used Flexicore on the fire station, and we used Flexicore in that building.
This is where the old building we're talking about. The old Restmore. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Zobrists were all in construction? The whole family was in construction and the trades?
No, I had one brother that was in the Air Force and stayed in.
Is that Noah?
And he's no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in Alabama.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went off to Bradley.
Yeah. Yeah. I was put in ditches when we started the field,
Yes.
and it was raining and cold, and I told my dad, I crawled out of that ditch. I says, I'm heading for Bradley tomorrow. I want you to approve of it. I got everything, all my signatures done with all the business people I knew, and that's where I went for 4 years. And then when I got out, we grew pretty big. Around
Yeah.
here locally, and I got to bid. After I was out of Bradley, I started bidding bigger jobs. So that's the way that was.
What are some of the bigger projects that you did around? We talked about Restmore and Prairie Village.
Well, the fire station was the first job
Yeah.
I got while I was in my last year at Bradley. And but we did all the schools and churches. The expansion.
Yes.
Jefferson School, we put the new cafeteria in and started doing a lot of stuff like that around. And we did some pretty. We'd go out 50 miles. I did banks, the bank in Havana, up at north of Peoria. I can't think of the name of all those banks, and then we did Hopedale Medical Complex. We started that, and from that we went to Chillicothe to another medical. We did a lot of medical hospitals and stuff. Havana, different. I started bidding. I got to know all the architects around, and I bid about every job around. Did a lot of work for CAT. Remember when they went down to Delavan
Yes.
with a big... yeah, I did a lot of... Who was it? I can't remember the guy that managed the first CAT building out here in Morton. I got to know him pretty good. He was
I
my
worked
neighbor.
downtown. Ah, okay.
He was my neighbor. I went to his funeral.
But you served on the board,
Yeah,
village board. How many terms did you serve? 2 terms.
yeah.
When I was in village government, I guess was when I was on the plan commission, I did a little research. It was based on something somebody said. I can't remember what it was now, but something prompted me to look back. And my observation was that as long as you could look back in Morton, the people were represented by very honest, responsible government representatives. I couldn't find any evidence ever of people putting their own interests ahead of the village or any kind of subterfuge.
No.
Was that your experience?
Yeah. I lived it. Yes, sir. I was always involved with the businessmen's meetings
Yes.
and joined them when I was one of the only. My older brothers just got out of the war, as I did, but we all got involved in the downtown business. And as the village grew, we grew with it. I first laid out the field out where we were building all the houses.
Yeah.
We started Country Air. That was a 200-acre farm that we bought, and I dig sewers out there by hand when we first started. Yeah, you can say what you want. I came through the dirt and whatever there was.
Well, that's good training.
But the infrastructure as Morton grew, I still know it in my head. It was very important. We had good people. We had good engineers to work with. I worked with every one of them.
And just for the
on our
record,
design.
just for the record, for anybody who might be looking at this in the future, Country Air is the area south of Jefferson, closer to Idlewood, and ranges from about Kansas or Mississippi up to about where Oregon is now. Is that right?
We started right on the edge of Morton, the edge of that farm, at the end of Adams Street.
Okay.
That's where we started laying it out and going that, because we were between two railroads.
Yes.
Going that way.
Yeah.
And I and Mayor Mathis drove to spend a day in Springfield asking a judge to give us the right to cross those tracks where we had to keep moving that way. And that's where it worked. And I didn't have a problem selling those things. I hired an engineer that worked for the state of Illinois. I just can't bring those names up. He's on every paper everything we sold. He and I pinned that whole area. About every weekend, we'd be out there pinning lots. And as we went, we sold them. Things were moving.
Oh, it was very
after the
attractive
war.
housing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of laid the way for Morton to grow. Everyone wanted a nice place, and they look nice today.
They do.
They don't last long. They sell fast. Yeah.
What were some of the significant events in Morton that you recall from that period? Go back as far as you want.
You see, the events that I remember is where some of our relatives were killed by fires or electric. We just barely got a big area built for power, and it blew up, and only a block away from where we were living, and some buyers were killed. You probably remember Henry Byer, don't you? No, you wouldn't, maybe.
I don't think so.
When did you come? In
77.
Yeah, he was going then. He run the waterworks, and there were several buyers involved in the early days, boys, and one of them had married my aunt, and everyone in those days were involved
Yeah.
as families. And every one of them helped us grow up, I guess. The Rapps and the major families, the Grimms, all of us went to school with all of their families. And it made a pretty close town to grow in, because it was like one family lived here. There was only 1,100 people in the late 30s, and all of them were involved in business. That's how I got to know them all. I joined everything that there was. We had the last one that I was one of the first in was Rotary.
Oh.
And we held that out at the field. We got them in the restaurant there. They met there, which helped make the village, all the optimists. We had everything that you could name. Had a meeting once a week. So you get to know everybody, and that's nice.
And when you were a kid, I think you told me a story once about being down on Main Street and something, Constable Bartolome, was that did you tell me about that?
I could have. I knew them all.
And the kids used to play pranks, and the constable would chase you?
Yeah. Well, that was Bartlemy.
Yeah.
Their grandpa was the constable, and he carried a gun. But his own family took the cow. He lived right across the street from us. They took his cow and put it in the new high school gymnasium. And it was the Bartlemy boys that did it. And he kind of made some manure all over the hallways. It was funny. We had, I think I had two uncles that were constables at that time. The village would just get the guys that had a car of their own to use. But there was nothing. The only thing was that power plant that burned and blew up was the major thing. But that was before I was born. And then we got Silco to come in here. Well, the building's still down there. And they did good, but it wasn't long. And when I got on the board, we bought the building and the whole thing. The village owned it at that time, because we were putting our own power in from that.
What did you do for recreation when you were a kid?
Well,
A little town.
yeah. No, I grew up playing ball.
Oh.
Every night we had, and that would have been after the grade school was built. My dad bought Dr. Conover's house, which was over there in that area where the school was built. So they had to buy it, and my dad bought it, and that's why we located it there. It was pretty handy to go to school, I'll tell you. And all the guys that worked over there hired us kids to clean the gymnasium floor. We grew up working over there. We didn't have a problem getting a job, I'll tell you. Anyway, Doc Conover built a new home, and then his son became the pharmacist. And what am I trying to tell you? We played ball. That was our recreation. And we fished Henry gets fish down there. He'd show us kids how to fish. In the ponds that came about behind the pottery from digging clay out of there. So we had plenty of things to do there. No, you see, the farmers would come in and hire us to work in the fields. That was our recreation. Well, I had an uncle that had a feed mill and all this stuff just across on the other side of the tracks. Well, us kids would go, he'd hire us to work for him. And we worked his fields south of Morton at that time. He'd plant beans and all kinds of stuff. The business people in Peoria would come out and buy them, and we'd help load out. There was and then we had the Getz factory right there. They'd hire us if they needed help unloading trains and cars and stuff. So I don't think we had play areas otherwise until we were in school, and then we played ball. Our principal was a coach as well. I played ball all year for the different teams that were going from the schools. And after, the first high school here didn't have a gymnasium. So the school board were smart enough to put the gym down in the new building, even though it was a grade school. And we played all our county tournaments and everything here, even the high school did. So that's all Morton didn't have much else till later on. But the potteries, with the traction here, people came in from Hopedale. Some of them came from Lincoln. And us guys would take it down to the Cardinal games, the train.
Yeah. Who were some of the major figures that you can remember from that period, people that helped make Morton into what it is today?
See, the rap boys that run the pottery,
Yeah.
They were involved in a lot of what Morton got here. The major thing they got here was our gas, our natural gas. And see, I don't know, they had to buy all that before we got the natural gas. When they took it in, it was about 1940. Panhandle Eastern. And that's when we bought the gas from Panhandle. That's what Silco was using. They wanted in Morton so bad it was, but we got our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were always looking ahead.
Yeah.
And that's what we had for guys running. And most of the people involved other than that would be the business people on Main Street. Miller Bakery. We had the Krug boys. We had the Freidinger boys. You know Les probably. Les Freidinger.
Yeah, I think so.
And it was just made up of a lot of good businessmen, good thinkers. And of course then the cannery came. That was always here as I can remember for me. But someone got them to come in here and build. Then after the war they started really building on, especially when we took the pumpkin. And you see, we had a good man running the lumber yard, Mathis Lumber.
Yes.
He was a good guy. Some guys would tell you that, but I knew him real good. He was a good man. He helped. He gave us Christmas parties. Kids, the whole Morton would go to the Christmas party, and everyone got a gift plus candy. Now, you think that didn't open us little kids' eyes? I was a block from the lumber yard living. My dad was working for him. We had turkeys every Christmas and Thanksgiving. Haul them around, take care of the people. Well, that guy started a building and loan first. He's the guy that put it together along with Ruling in the only bank we had.
Fritz Ruling.
Not Fritz, his
Oh,
dad.
his dad.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then, but you see, if you got guys like that want to make a buck as well as see the town grow, which helps everyone, that's the way it went. I couldn't say a thing against any of the business people. I really couldn't. They were all good people to be with. I was in about everything involved with them, and everything went really well.
Well, that was another characteristic of Morton, I think. That you look back, the sense of commitment to the community and the honesty with which people conducted their business. There was an open and straightforward characteristic that not found very many other places.
Well, that comes from the religious thinking of what this town was built on. How could you get a better foundation? If that foundation is there and, born into your thinking, how can you go wrong? You're getting your wisdom from the right place.
That's a very good observation.
Oh, man.
One of the curious things, I think, the town was originally founded, or the township anyway, by Anglo-Scots-Irish shortly after the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And then there was another movement in the 1800s, again, as most of these families moved out of Switzerland and Alsace-Lorraine and then on to here. Morton became a kind of a linchpin. A large number of those families came here. Something made it attractive.
Oh, yeah.
What is it that you think that made so many of those people pick Morton? I mean, Morton is almost the largest population, single population, as nearly as I can tell, of Apostolics and Mennonites.
Yeah, yeah. I think it starts in Europe. See, they were having big trouble in Europe, and it was all religion.
Yes.
And big things were happening, and these people were getting away from it. They got out of there, and they started setting up their own. You asked me about the Apostolics. The first church they had here in Morton burned. It was all built out of wood. And when they lost that, they built it. I almost cried going by there when they started tearing that thing down.
Oh,
my life was made there. Yes, and it was all German at that time. And that's they were all coming from an eastern town here in Illinois. They heard about it. The church drew them here. That's where my dad was born, Cessna Park, on the east side of Illinois. Yeah. And so many people came from there. It just, you can't. I was trying to tell my wife today, because she's from Minnesota. She can't figure it out. I said, all those Zimmermans came to our reunions. Everybody, all the Zimmermans here. And they all naturally married one different ones. And I can't go anywhere without seeing somebody that was tied to our family. And, you know, then when Holtz Manufacturing came and the Getz boys opened this place, they hired a lot of people.
Yep.
And they did well, real well. And you see all these, the Heinegers and all of them, we used to work in Indiana a lot over there because our relatives were there.
Yep.
Al Heineger's dad had farms over there, different ones. A lot of them had farms over in Indiana before they landed here.
Yep.
So it's quite interesting.
Well, there was a trail, apparently, that they followed from the East Coast. Herb Roth talked
Yeah.
about it. It stopped in Butler, Ohio,
Yeah.
and then someplace in Indiana, and it was just kind of a progression until they got here, and everybody seemed to think that Morton was the place. And I thought part of it was because of the availability of good farmland,
Yeah.
but obviously there was something more than that, and the cultural element that they formed a nucleus of people, and then more came, and the town became predominantly that inflow of people.
Yeah. Yep, that's how my grandpa got here. Young. I had 3 paper routes growing up as a kid in grade school. Crazy.
You were always an
I
enterprising
knew all
guy,
of them.
bud.
I'm curious about the Getz family. What business did they do? What was their family? We haven't touched on that a lot.
Started a fence company.
Fence. Okay.
And that goes way back to, it keeps going back. There's a ton of families that the Getzes came from. The Getz boys married into a humongous family that started they must have had 1,000 acres in Peoria on the north side. And there was 4 Getz boys married into that family, sisters.
Okay.
Every one of them had Ben Getz, Joe Getz, John Getz, every one of them. And they had the Keystone. Well, that family owned Keystone already. And that goes to Tremont people all around here because they were making farm equipment.
And the fence company became Morton Buildings, is that right?
Morton Buildings started when Henry took over.
Okay.
His dad was a preacher in the AC, and when he died, Henry took over. He took a hold of it, and the man he hired, you knew him. I can't never think of. He took over for Henry, the sale of all his housing and stuff and farms. I think he's still selling. Henry grew that thing. Well, he taught Henry that type building. And he was a main salesman for Henry at that time. And I think he went back to Germany. His wife died, and I think he went back. I can't think of his name. Not that anyone else knew him anyway, but he made that building go. He helped design it, and he saw how they started selling. They were selling north of here. That's where he really got started on Morton Buildings. You see, Henry came into my office one day and he wanted to buy a bunch of our lots out here. I said, what are you going to do, start building? No, he says, I'm not getting into your business. I knew Henry
Yeah.
like a book. Anyway, he was a nice guy to me. And he bought the last land I had out by the field. He says, he was working with this housing company out in Deer Creek.
Oh, Brassy
Yeah.
at the time?
Yeah. And he bought a lot of buildings from them, expanding into, well, you know what he owns here in Morton,
Yes.
don't you? Well, he wanted to get into the business, and he had some houses built out at Country Air. He saw that might be pretty good. Well, anyway, he came downtown where we were having coffee, remember?
Yes.
At the
yes.
old library,
Yeah.
Mathis Lumber
Yes.
Company. And he says, he called me outside. He said, "Bud, I want that land out there." Well, I says, "You have to go through me." I says, "You don't want that." "Yes, I do." He says, "I got a bunch of houses I want to build." So he left his trademark here. That's what he did. Every one of them came from Deer Creek. He saw these guys that were really putting it together. So he was expanding his feelings. Henry didn't make a move without thinking about making a buck.
And Henry Getz, by the way, was 93, I think.
Yeah.
Still building out here on
He
York
was.
Drive.
Yes, sir.
Yes, his last project.
He put some nice homes up out there.
Didn't you tell me that between two of those buildings down there, there's a tree growing? A tree in the basement or a tree between the walls or something? You didn't tell me that?
I never heard of it.
Oh, well, maybe I'm mistaken. I thought you had told one time that somewhere in there that there was a space between the walls, that there was something in there, and I thought it was a tree growing, but maybe that's not it.
There could have been, because the bakery had 4 foot through there.
I was thinking the other side of the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But where?
Where were the old Leaves and Beans? We used to get there and coffee. I thought you said one morning when you were there that somewhere in there was a building that there'd been a tree growing in the basement or between the walls or something. Maybe I got that wrong.
No, that could have been Jim Carey's tell you that.
Oh, that might be.
Because, see, his dad bought the theater.
Ah, okay, that's right.
That's about what it was.
It was something about the theater.
See,
yes.
before that theater was bought, I watched him build a Hudson Terraplane sales,
Yes.
car sales.
Yes.
Well, the Yennis family had that. You probably heard of Phil Howder. He's
Yes.
okay. Well, Phil got the idea he wanted a theater downtown. They wouldn't give him one in any other area. Theaters went up in the city,
Yes.
in the major
Right.
part of this town. And I watched him build that. They tore the Terraplane sales. She probably never heard of a
I
Terraplane.
don't know what a terraplane is.
Hudson Terraplane.
They were cars?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hudson Automobile Company.
Got it.
Yeah, that's when the town started growing. And it was put up probably in 36,
Okay.
somewhere in there. And that building then was later sold to Jim Carey's dad. And my little German band would play in there if they didn't have Three
Oh, yes.
Stooges and these
Yes.
guys as something to laugh at between the movies and let people go out and get popcorn and whatever they wanted. And they'd call us, our little band, to come down and play. We played all the theaters around. We had a little German band we put together. Our neighbors,
Oh.
our neighborhood,
What instrument did you play?
the trumpet.
Oh.
And my brother played the sax. Howard Rapp played this. We had, well, we call it a German band because another family moved into our area, and one was a little chubby guy, and we decided to put him on the bass horn. Oh, and he could play it. They just came from Germany and moved here. When we played the Brothers Tournament in Peoria, we'd always start the tournament playing the Star Spangled Banner over there at the Peoria Auto Parts bowling alley. That's where we always started the Brothers Tournament.
What is the Brothers Tournament?
Bowling.
Bowling tournament. Okay.
Now, when that bowling alley came, boy, I had a built-in job. I could run over there in the evening after supper, set pins for all the guys that bowled. They had, that bowling alley was really brought a lot in here.
The bowling alley was done, as I recall, or as I heard, by the then mayor, who negotiated with somebody to build the bowling alley and something about acquiring the land. I can't remember. Does that ring a bell with you?
We built a bowling alley over the creek, the drainage creek from way out here. That building was built over there, and well, the mayor saw to it that it went up.
That's where the photography studio is now.
All of that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
The one on Main Street?
Yes.
Oh,
You go on
okay.
the other
Where is
end,
it?
where all the water comes out
There's a
from
bowling alley
North
there.
Morton.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Who was the mayor then?
Oscar Mathis.
Okay.
No, it was Bartlemy.
Okay.
Bartlemy
Bartlemy.
Implement. He owned all that
Yep.
land. That's how it got there. So anyway, that was kind of funny.
But that was an early example of economic development in Morton where
Yeah,
somebody
it
took
was.
the initiative to help
Yeah.
make that happen.
We had to get approval from the state.
Yep.
See, that's right on Highway 21, 121 going south. And I watched them build. I'd go over there as a kid and watch that building go up. And then the Knowles owned it. They came from Roanoke, those guys. And Bob Knowles' dad was a good bowler. And he's the guy that got the permission to build one there. And then he hired me during the first part of the war. We couldn't waste wood on pins, maple pins. Evidently they were using it somewhere. So Bob called me and he says, why don't you come in every day after school and take care of these pins? See, they'd get, if you lose enough wood on those pins, that's that hardwood.
Yep.
He had to have a certain weight. We had to have a 3-pound weight on every pin, or it wouldn't be approved by the bowling business. So I had the job of taking care of those pins all through the war till I went in, and we kept them that weight. He put up a big machine in there.
Pin setter?
Oh, no.
Oh.
I set the pins.
Okay.
We learned to pick 3 of them up at
That's
once.
fine.
And my hands aren't that big. Boy, they took care of us till they got the mechanical stuff. Who was a baseball player in Peoria that that went into the Hall of Fame this year?
Zobrist.
You don't remember his name?
No.
Well, his uncle and dad came out here to bowl because they were good from Peoria. And Peoria didn't have that much bowling. Really, at that time, that wasn't much. Now it's down to nothing again.
So you went off to war,
Yeah,
Army,
Air Force.
Air Force.
Yeah,
What did you do in the Air Force?
I was a weatherman.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And where did they put me? Tucson. Davis Mountain Air Base. You ought to see the plane sitting there.
I have been there.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Why?
where I ended up.
Yeah. Have we missed anything that we should have talked about, Bud, that you can think of?
I think of a lot of stuff since Mike
Yeah.
talked to me. The memories that I had were very good with everybody I know. I think I know you pretty good.
Yeah.
I appreciate this, whatever. If I think of anything, let me know.
Yeah. So in the meantime, I will say thank you, sir.
Yes, you're very welcome. I want to tell you one thing that I tried doing. We ended up buying the old Morton Pottery.
Yep.
And I had Syracuse, I still have it in my file. Syracuse is a big company in New York. I got a letter from them. They wanted to buy that. Chalmer Arnett was the mayor. He said, "You don't come in here with that crap." I said, "What do you mean? I got a nice company that wants to move into Morton." He shut her down. He wouldn't even let me bring it before the board. I couldn't believe it. It was something that the Raps turned him off on. Something, I don't know what it was, but that would have been a major company wanting into this town. And I often think of that, how we had that. They took and used some of the kilns over there. And they were making pots. They had a big market. Would have been, see, Syracuse is in about every restaurant today. China, oh man, they had, Syracuse company is big.
Okay.
Well, I just thought you ought to know
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
That's how we can lose stuff. They didn't say no. The mayor.
Why do you
I
remember
don't know
why?
why he said no.
Chalmer
I can
Arnett?
still can't figure that out.
He was,
yeah.
he was the mayor when I came here, or just had been in office. I
Yeah,
can't
well,
remember.
it was in the 70s
Yeah.
when he went in. And I couldn't, I said, I knew Chalmer like
Yeah.
anybody, and I don't want to get into it. Don't want to get into it. I says, Chalmer, it's right there by the railroad. Everything's set. They know it. Well, at that time, what was when we were doing a lot of expansion out at the field anyway,
Yes.
and different companies would. They didn't go to the realtors. They'd come into my office, and you got to be ready to handle that. You get, if you want to keep this thing going. Gee, man. I don't know how people think. Maybe they think that guy's trying to fill his pockets. You don't do things like that.
Well, Morton has been very successful.
Yes,
And we had
every bit of it.
We had a bad patch in the 80s during the recession.
Right.
A lot of that was related to cat. But then we kind of renewed in the last 10 or 15 years, particularly since we put some effort into growing business. We've recovered everything that was ever lost and then some by a good bit.
Oh, yeah.
So we've been very fortunate. And again, I think it has something to do with what people see as the quality of the community, and they want to be located here.
That's
we tend to
right.
attract businesses that like the culture that we've created.
Yeah. See, we got transportation. We got everything.
Yes.
It's here. So there you have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bud.
Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, really.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you much.